I just want to start by welcoming everyone and thank you for attending this Culture Wizard Forum, Building a Pipeline of Culturally Agile Professionals, which will be led by Paula Caligieri. My name is Shonda Burke. I am Director of Intercultural Programs at RW3, and I will be producing this webinar today. I'd like to introduce Dr. Paula Caligieri, who partners with RW3 Culture Wizard as a research advisor and content contributor, and has developed two key assessments available on the Culture Wizard online learning platform. One is the Global Leadership Development Tool, and the other is the SAGE, or Self-Assessment for Global Endeavors. Paula researches, publishes, and consults in three areas: global leadership development, cultural agility, and international assignee management. She is a professor of human resource management at Rutgers University, where she was the director of the Center for Human Resource Strategy for 10 years. I'm going to pass the ball to Paula so we can begin.
It is a thrill to be doing this webinar. I've been working with RW3. I've known Mike and Charlene for probably close to, maybe 20 years. Certainly an organization I respect, so it is an honor to be doing this webinar and sharing some pieces from my new book. The platform's on fire right now for cultural agility. I'm not sure if anyone has seen the report from PwC. There's a little quote on the screen right now that about a third of CEOs, when they were surveyed by PwC, they reported that they've had to cancel strategic initiatives due to talent shortages globally, and the pressures became worsened because they didn't have enough culturally agile leaders. That's very powerful. It shows that at the C-suite, the CEOs, they're paying attention to this issue. Followed by, though, this report from IBM. They did a survey of CHROs, and they found that if you actually looked at what HR needs to deliver to their organization in order for global growth to occur, the number one thing was effective global leadership, culturally agile leaders. The thing that they responded as doing the least well was developing global leaders. So the thing that's most important is actually the thing that we self-describe as doing least well. Not terribly surprising. We know these folks are pretty amazing, right? These global leaders. We know that they're able to quickly, comfortably, and effectively work in different cultures and with people from different cultures. These are folks who can hit the ground running when they go into a different culture or go into a multicultural team and truly succeed. These folks are able to identify how to respond in different environments. So let me just drop back a little bit on this one. When I developed actually the phrase cultural agility, I did it very intentionally. The concept of agility really suggests that an agile individual, they don't lose balance regardless of the situation, right? And if you think about it, cultural agility, in any given situation, a professional needs to respond really in one of three ways. They either need to adapt their behavior to a local context, right? They need to hold a corporate standard. That's the second possibility, which means that they might have to say, listen, this is our safety procedure. These are our quality standards. I'm sorry, even though it's not consistent with the local way, let's figure out a way to get this done in a consistent manner. And the third way is really this issue around integration, and that is saying, okay, listen, not my way, not your way. We're going to take the time to build something entirely new. The reason this is unique around cultural agility is that we know from research conducted, we know that the best global leaders, the most culturally agile professionals, are able to toggle across these three. So sometimes they adapt, sometimes they minimize, and sometimes they integrate behavior. Really very different from the way we've often thought about cultural agility. So we also know that these individuals, I'm sure many of your organizations have competency models. Some of you may have global leadership competency models. My hunch is that if we took a look at them, their competencies would fall into three big buckets. One would be around managing oneself. So these would be the activities or the competencies such as tolerance of ambiguity, or operating with humility. Those are really those self-management. An individual can handle the demands of the situation, either the global leadership or the global professional situation. The second sort of bucket of cross-cultural competencies is that they're able to develop relationships. These relationships are critical for building adjustment. They're critical for being effective. Competencies such as perspective taking, we know is so important for global leaders and culturally agile professionals. The desire and ability to form relationships and do that well, also very important. So second big bucket of competencies, if you're putting together a global leadership competency model, you want some competencies around relationships. The third, though, is really about the enterprise-wide mindset, making decisions for the organization at a global level effectively. Competencies in this bucket, if you will, things like ability to think outside the box, some of that creative thinking, ability to absorb ideas from wherever they come, maybe not just headquarters, but from around the world. Understanding the company on a global scale. All of these are competencies, again, so critical for culturally agile professionals. So kind of two levels here. If you think about all of these terrific competencies, also important, but also that ability to respond for whatever the situation demands, whether cultural minimization, cultural adaptation, or cultural integration. These folks are superheroes, right? So not terribly surprising that they're hard to come by. So if you want to, if you're not looking at the screen, you might want to for a second. This is sort of the classic help wanted for culturally agile professionals. We want technical experts with the stamina of an Olympic runner, the mental agility of an Einstein, the conversational skills of a professor of languages, the detachment of a judge, the tact of a diplomat, and the perseverance of an Egyptian pyramid builder. It sort of feels, so for those of you who are doing selection assessments, it sort of feels at times that this is what you're looking for, this kind of a person. The reality, though, is much different, and the next slide is really the reality of how we select. And that is, listen, we'll take the technical expert, someone who's willing to travel, or in the case of international assignees, willing to relocate. We'll train for everything else. Don't worry about it. This is a little bit of the concern, and I'll tell you, this is why this platform's on fire. It's part of the reason why we're struggling with building a culturally agile workforce, because unfortunately, training, while critical for building global leadership, it's not necessarily enough. If you're a Dilbert fan, you might want to put your eyes up on the screen for a second. This is for those of you who like Dilbert. It's kind of a classic Alice cartoon in the Albonian series. She was clearly, I'll give you a second to read this. She's clearly not the most effective global leader. So regardless of the training that she was given, poor Alice really just doesn't get it. Hopefully you've had a chance to read that cartoon. Bless her heart, Alice. I think we all know an Alice, though. Someone who, regardless of where they go, somehow they just don't get it. They just maybe don't intend to offend, but they might, but just really cannot connect to people from different cultures. We all know an Alice. That suggests that we probably need to start at the beginning, which really means that building a culturally agile set of professionals, building a pipeline of culturally agile talent, it really becomes an HR team effort. So from the start, who you're bringing into the organization, who's attracted to working for your organization, how you're assessing them into your organization, how you're developing them once they're there, and then sort of that ultimate developmental experience, who's selected to go on international assignees, how are you preparing them to do so, and how are you monitoring their development. So if you will, I'm going to spend about 20 minutes going through really quickly some of the key issues regarding each of these, with a bigger emphasis on the latter two. So starting off with sourcing talent, for those of you who either have been in recruiting or worked in recruiting, we're seeing a lot of organizations now casting a far wider net for culturally agile professionals. What we found in our research is that true true motivation for international activities, it gets fostered very early. You see it among school-age children, you see it among teens, you see it in college-age young adults, you see it in early life professionals. These are people who absolutely want to be doing international things. They might be studying abroad, they might do international volunteerism, they might join Model UN. You'll see these types of things on the resume. They'll take language classes. I put up a little web page for Internations, it's an organization for people who are interested in international things as well. We're seeing a lot of companies now source talent through different areas such as Internations. I know Peace Corps, for instance, they have a career fair in Washington once a year, and they're starting to see an uptick in private sector organizations recruiting former Peace Corps volunteers. So the sourcing issue is so critical. Then we think about, okay, so they're attracted to working for your organization, you want to bring them into your organization. What about selection and assessment? And when we think about selection and assessment, often it's helpful to focus on the things that people really do bring with them when they come into the organization, those things that aren't going to be necessarily easy to change once they're there. First one to think about is personality traits. So for those of you who are maybe have a psych background, you know that true personality traits, they're relatively immutable. For those of you who have multiple children, you know that your child's personality, you started seeing it. Some of you probably saw it at birth. Some of you maybe started to see it, age 1, age 2. As it turns out, personality traits tend to form and solidify by around age 6 or 7, and they're with us. The traits most salient, most important for culturally agile professionals, there's 3. Emotional stability, openness, and extroversion. So in each of those, we've found, again, lots of research on this. Happy to share the research studies with you. Emotional stability, certainly because you need people to be able to handle the ambiguity of situations. Extroversion, because so much of what we do is based on human contact. So for those who are a little more introverted, really helping them, teaching them the behaviors of an extrovert to get out there and meet and form relationships. And then also certainly openness, willingness to try different things, see things from different perspectives and the like. So those personality traits, so very critical. Again, if you're not looking at the screen, you might want to for a second. The other one that we found is that language skills are so critical. So what's on your screen right now is a series of images. You might remember these from your Psych 101 intro psych classes. These are called ambiguous images. If you stare at them for a minute or two, which we won't do, what you'll start to see, what will emerge, are multiple images. So if you're staring at them, the upper left is, you'll see a face and a saxophone player. The upper right, this one is affectionately referred to as Rat Man, and that is the formal term. One way you look at it, it's rat, other way, man. Lower left is Duck Rabbit, depending on which side you look, and the other one is Face. Why did I show you these? Well, as it turns out, for those of you who might even realize this, when you have multilingual skills, when you're able to speak 2 languages fluently, what's been found is that individuals are able to see these multiple images very quickly. Monolingual children, monolingual adults have a harder time seeing these images. Now, why is this relevant in a conversation about cultural agility? Well, it's relevant because when you think about interpreting behavior, any given behavior, if you can quickly default to not just one meaning but multiple meanings, it helps us as culturally agile professionals. The challenge is that most organizations, when they select people around language skills, they select people who have the language that matches the country where they're going to be sent. In fact, any language skills, if somebody's fluently bilingual, in fact help individuals become more culturally agile. So something to flag if you're looking at resumes, individuals who have fluent language skills. Next one I want to show you, I think many of you may have seen some of the research that came out on linking creativity and international experience. Again, linking back to that early life experience. This particular study was done asking individuals to draw aliens. So again, if you want to look up at your screen for a second, the aliens on the left were deemed to be more creative than the aliens on the right. Okay, Kalajuri, why on earth am I showing you these images? Again, this particular study was showing that those who did the more creative images were also thinking about their international experiences. The lower creativity, again to the right, seemed to be coming from those with fewer international experiences and weren't really thinking about their international experiences. So again, going back to some of those competencies, the idea of early life experience linking to one of those key competencies for global professionals, meaning being able to see outside the box or think a little more creatively. I could do this all day long. There's so many studies out there. They're wonderful. But keep in mind three most critical things when you're selecting people into the pipeline: personality traits, those language skills, and any evidence of self-initiated cross-cultural experiences. They're just showing great success. When you want individuals, so you find these great folks, you assess them, you're doing a great job, they want to be attracted to your organization, right? You want them to say yes. So at this point, really look at your employee value proposition. Think about the types of opportunities you're offering your staff. In some cases, these individuals will be very attracted to the fact that you offer cross-cultural training. You have an online training platform. They might be very attracted to international volunteerism program you have. They might be very attracted to opportunities to work on global projects or work in global teams or whatever the global thing is. Really pushing those things out front for those candidates who really do have this international orientation. They'll be the ones that you absolutely want to attract in. Okay, so let's go ahead and switch over to training and development. So if you think about now, up to this point, we've really talked about sort of that, who are you bringing in, who are you attracting, who are you recruiting, who are you selecting. Now you have them. They've walked through your door. Now what do we do with them to make sure they keep building their cultural agility? If we were to do a little poll, my guess is that what would come out is like all others. There's two kind of primary activities that companies are doing. They're doing some form of cross-cultural training, and they're doing some type of activity where they send people on international assignments. So those are the two I'm going to focus on most, starting with the issue of cross-cultural training. There is wonderful, very comprehensive, outstanding research that's coming out now about the most effective cross-cultural training. What we're finding is that the best possible training is timely. It's given at the point when individuals so need it. They can access information at the point when they need it. It's also sequential. So if you think about, we as humans, we have something called absorptive capacity. We need an opportunity to build our knowledge. So if we think about, maybe somebody sitting through a training class might find it interesting, but once they actually get into the country or start working on their global team, now all of a sudden they see the relevance of that particular material. The idea of sequential is that it builds on what an individual learns and understands and what they're starting to question, and actually offers that information when needed. And also the idea of relevance. Certainly there's wonderful training programs out there. There's also a lot of things that might not be quite so relevant, and certainly you want folks to focus in on what is most critical. So again, great research out there. You might want to evaluate your own cross-cultural training against these three, whether timely, they get it when they need it, it's sequential, they get the information as the need arises, and that it's relevant to them in their jobs. A great example of this, and sincerely, I'm not just saying this because RW3 invited me on here, I'm saying this because I've admired their platform for a long time. They've got a wonderful, for those of you who haven't seen it, an online learning platform that truly does all of these things. What I like about the Culture Wizard is that it does allow, it's at an individual's fingertips. So in talking to leaders and talking to professionals who work globally or work multiculturally, they can access the knowledge at the moment that they need it. They find the information highly relevant, and that they can unfold it at their own pace. So really a terrific tool if you haven't already seen it. So that's our platform. We know cross-cultural training is needed, necessary. You can certainly push that into the organization so that lots of people get this information. What we also want to do is focus on those developmental opportunities that you're giving your folks, the expensive ones. These are those international assignments. This quote was a Jack Welch quote. It's my obligatory Jack Welch quote. It's from 1997. I've been at this for a long time. I used to start my articles with this quote because it seemed to give our articles relevance. Let me just read it to you. The Jack Welch of the future cannot be like me. I spent my entire career in the United States. The next head of General Electric will be somebody who spent time in Bombay and Hong Kong and Buenos Aires. We have to send our best and our brightest overseas to make sure they will have the training that will allow them to be the global leaders who will make GE flourish in the future. Well, that's actually a lovely quote. However, the reality is it perpetuates some pretty significant myths about international assignments, and there's really two. One is that not all international experiences have developmental properties. Please hear that, because I promise you, picking someone up from one country and plunking them down into another one and having them breathe the air of that other country will not necessarily make them culturally agile professionals. They can clock in their 2 years, 2.5 years, 6 months, I don't care what it is, what time period, but when they leave, they may or may not have gained cross-cultural competency. So issue number one, we need to talk about what are those developmental properties. And then number two, go back to the Alice cartoon, the Dilbert cartoon. Not everyone has the personality characteristics to develop from even the best international assignments. So actually what we're finding so powerfully in the research and in practice is that the right person with all those great dispositional traits, placing them into a truly developmental opportunity, that's when you start to see the needle move on cross-cultural competencies, and that's when some really exciting things begin to happen. So let's just talk about that really quickly. Let's go first to the developmental properties. So they would revoke my cap and gown if I didn't use the word theory once in every webinar. So here's my use of the word theory. What we know from theory and from practice, frankly, is that there are traits, there are properties of experiences that change people's, that shift people's behaviors, they shift people's attitudes, and in extreme examples, they shift people's values. The top three actually come from work that rolls back as early as the 50s from race relations in the U.S., in how attitudes towards people who were different improved, increased, and in fact, how respectful peer-level relationships were built. The last three, and I'll go through what these are, came out of social learning. Really, how do we learn to do new and experience different behaviors? The top three, significant, meaningful, peer-level interactions, common goals, and a supportive context. Okay, let's think about those international assignments. Significant, meaningful, peer-to-peer interactions. For those of your folks who are sent who are very, very senior, it's tough for them to find peers in the host country. The other two, common goals and a supportive context, most organizations can handle that, but it's that first one. Really thinking about to what extent these developmental assignees have the opportunity for peer-level interaction. So very critical. Team training actually is a great example of this, not an international assignment, but another way to build cultural agility. The last three, opportunities to practice behaviors, make it professionally safe to make some mistakes, and receive some feedback. Of those three, usually the one that most organizations have a little bit of trouble with is receiving feedback. Someone who's willing to tell either the international assignee or the team member, hey, listen, we're going to operate on a slightly different culture here, and here's the way we need you to be doing things. Your current behavior is being interpreted another way. So again, thinking through those, so critical. We've worked with organizations where we've actually actively structured their leadership development programs to include these dimensions. So holding receiving managers accountable for creating this type of an environment. It's had really powerful effect, so something to consider. The other thing that I probably should add here, we've also done audits of organizations and looked at the extent to which the assignments, just looking across your global assignments, the extent to which these properties were apparent. And what was fascinating is that almost across the board with organizations, the assignments that were identified to be developmental had the fewest developmental properties. Those that were deemed to be more technical or functional, kind of go there, get a job done, come home, they tended to have a lot of developmental properties. So it's a nice wake-up call. It's actually, again, really good if a concern is how to make your assignments more developmental. And then, of course, we have global mobility. It seems to some extent like they're incongruent goals. We ask our global mobility folks to manage the risk of the assignee in many ways. We want to make sure they're adjusted, their families are adjusted. We want to make sure they're comfortable, of course, safe and secure without question. If I ask, and if there's any global mobility folks on the call, I'm sure if I gave you the task to make them feel like they're not even out of their home country, you could do that. That's the reality of increasing, or rather reducing, the risk of the assignment. We can actually squeeze out everything that's potentially developmental from the experience. That kind of is in contrast with the properties of the developmental assignment. So when we think about managing global mobility, at least from the perspective of support practices, that's a more active conversation I'm starting to see with progressive organizations where they're actually having those types of discussions between leadership development and global mobility on the right balance and the right type of experience that will, of course, make the family comfortable, happy, adjusted, but at the same time give the individual international assignee an opportunity to develop even outside of the workplace, where actually most of the development occurs. Okay, so let's go ahead, and I'm just going to walk you through some of these key practices. With global mobility, when Sean introduced me, I've been at this a long time, and I began with a tool called the SAGE, the Self-Assessment for Global Endeavors. I could actually roll back to 1989 at my application for graduate school, where it read, I would like to investigate the predictors of success of international assignees. Frankly, since 1989, that's what I've been doing. Spent a lot of time doing research, looking at what makes people effective living and working internationally and as global leaders. The SAGE actually is a tool designed to help individuals make a great decision, make the decision that's right for them and right for their families. So if you think about the idea of letting people own the decision, giving individuals an opportunity to really think through, select in, select out, whether this is the right opportunity. What we found in our research is that very few people, when they get that far to actually start thinking about the assignment, say, no, this isn't right for me. What it does, actually two very powerful things, it primes people to be very proactive on the challenges they may encounter. So rather than global mobility having to solve it all, the individuals then take some ownership of what their challenges might be and can, in a more targeted way, bring those challenges to their sending manager, receiving manager, or global mobility to work together to try to solve that. It gives people an exposure where they may have been just focused on a few things. It actually gives them a broader exposure, which is extremely helpful. The other thing this does that we found in our research is that it gives people a chance to build their efficacy. This is especially important for those who have never worked internationally before. People might not know that they have the characteristics, or they're wired to do really well, or their family support will actually serve them very well internationally. These are things that what we found is that individuals who had an opportunity to take this actually did build efficacy. So real good first step, give them an opportunity to self-select and give them a good decision-making tool. The next is focusing on selection. There's a selection test for international assignees, STIA. There's others out there. The idea here is when you're thinking of, if you have the luxury of multiple candidates, giving them a chance, or giving your company a chance to really select the individual who is most likely to develop from the experience, but also more likely to succeed in the experience. Remember, there's always two pieces to this: the developmental tasks and also the actual tasks that they're the technical tasks that they're being asked to do. Once they're selected, and you do actually, so the performance management, the next one, the support practices, you can think about these happening concurrently. You're doing all the right things for them, but on the performance management side, really identifying what are they there to do, and then what are they there to develop. So two pieces, real important: what are they there to do, what are they there to develop? Are you offering the appropriate coaching around, whether if they're falling short on either of those? This is especially true if an assignment includes a developmental component. Real important, go back to those cross-cultural competencies and really see to what extent the needle's moving on their ability to gain those. We've had some great success with 360, using 360 feedback in this regard. Anyhow, lots of opportunities, and make sure you're managing both what they're there to do and what they're there to gain. Appropriate support practices, again, I really love the Culture Wizard for this. The idea that we're giving folks certainly the support they need when they need it, making sure the assignment is safe and secure and all those other great things, but also making sure we're not making the experience devoid of all things that could make it potentially very developmentally rich. So again, thinking through those support practices in a more integrated, strategic way. And then lastly, and not small, is this repatriation question, and it's kind of the perpetual ROI question. And ROI is for an intangible asset such as somebody's competence, is a little tough to nail down financially. But frankly, if you start to see the needle move on cross-cultural competencies, and you're able to point to a change in cross-cultural competencies, and you're able to show how that knowledge or how those competencies were used upon repatriation, all of a sudden your repatriation question, from an ROI perspective at least, you're able to demonstrate value. From the individual's perspective, though, this is where there's a little bit of a rub. I can go roll back to the work I've done with clients where we did the audit of different types of international assignments. Those who tend to be identified as those developmental assignees or strategic assignees, their careers are managed pretty closely. So after they do their international stint, the next step is fairly clear for them. Very different for those who are on more technical or functional assignments. Remember, as I mentioned, they tend to have a lot of developmental properties. They tend to be working with peers. They tend to be, their sleeves are rolled up. They're actually, they're changing. But their careers aren't managed quite so much from a cross-cultural competence perspective. So something to consider if changes really occurred in individuals, it's good to know it, and it's good to then ideally leverage it within the organization. So kind of a full chain reaction from who you're bringing into the organization, who you're bringing in for your international assignees, through how you're managing them through the international assignment, and to how you're using their, ultimately using their cross-cultural competencies. I want to just mention, as I'm kind of rounding out here, other things. So I get this question all the time around what else is there other than kind of cross-cultural training and international assignments. One of the best practices we're seeing out there right now is global teams. Certainly all of your organizations have them. They're wonderfully developmental, especially if good things happen, if they as a team receive training ahead of time. I think the Culture Wizard has a global teams tool that's highly effective in that regard. Global teams can be wonderfully powerful developmental opportunities. We're seeing that any type of dyad, like a mentoring relationship where two individuals are from different cultures, that too could be a very powerful developmental opportunity. I know some of my clients were seeing them offer extended business trips. So with business travel being down, when an individual is actually going to another country for work, we're seeing companies add a couple days on, and the purpose of that time is to spend time with peers from different countries. Valuable, lots of learning is happening. It's been a really good practice. The last one around volunteerism, again, the rate of companies starting international volunteerism is up. In the past 5 years, it's up 250%. I just did a large project with GlaxoSmithKline for their program called Pulse. If anyone's familiar, I'm happy to send you information on it. It's outstanding. Started in 2009 by their CEO. It's run out of HR. Among its purposes, in part, it's a developmental opportunity for high-skilled individuals. These folks go on sabbatical for 3 to 6 months. They use their skills in an international NGO. What we found is that in terms of the benefit, it was the ultimate win-win-win. So the NGO, so we actually traced this 6 months later, the NGO was winning because they found a sustained effect of the individual's presence. So the person was there, they worked on a project, good things happened 6 months later. The individual was winning in terms of they've developed new knowledge, they've gained some skills, they've gained some cross-cultural competencies that they were able to bring with them. Their engagement increased, and there's lots of great things that happened for the individual. But most important from a stakeholder perspective, the company was winning. So they were able to bring knowledge newly created while they were on their international assignment with the NGO back to their business unit and leverage that knowledge. So again, real interesting possibility, and I think we do have more available to us than just international assignments, the traditional international assignments for development. Something to consider, something to think about. What I'd like to flag is that regardless of what we do, so whether you're offering the global teams for developmental purposes or these international volunteerism opportunities, or even the dyadic relationships, the mentor-mentee relationships, think about that cross-cultural training first. It's first for a reason. Really flagging, helping individuals understand how cultures may differ, and then specifically helping them understand what could be different in the country where they're operating or with the people with whom they're working. That idea of heightening that awareness can be real helpful, helps people understand, helps people build that cross-cultural competence of perspective taking. So important. Also helps with tolerance of ambiguity and moves the needle on other competencies as well. So something to consider prior to any of these experiences, allow them to receive some type of cross-cultural training. Lastly is around assessment. You want to ask the question, is it working? I think, we spend a lot of money on activities that are designed to be developmental. I know there's a big movement now toward big data. There's a reason there is. We need to see whether something's actually working, and those studies are easy enough to set up, identifying, so in many cases, identifying cross-cultural competencies prior to an experience. With a lot of my organizations, I use 360. Sometimes it's self-assessment, sometimes it's other assessment. Actually assessing or auditing the experience itself, and then seeing what happens after the case, after the fact. Real important to keep in mind whether those developmental opportunities really are developmental opportunities, worth paying attention to. Lastly, of course, is that you want your associates, you want your employees to be owning their own development. Develop the Global Leadership Development Tool for this purpose. The idea that giving individuals a chance to say, you know what, private, confidentially, I'm going to do a little heart-to-heart with myself here and see that I'm low or high on certain characteristics. And I'm going to actually try to build my competence. I'm going to actually seek out opportunities independently to build my cross-cultural competencies. So thinking about them from an organizational perspective, are the things that we're offering actually changing cross-cultural competencies, but also thinking about these cross-competencies from an individual perspective. And that is the individual kind of owning their own development and actually doing the things that might help them gain cross-cultural competencies. Last slide is really to remind everyone that this is a team effort. As the RW3 team knows, I'm doing a lot of keynotes these days, and I'm frankly spending a lot of time with Chief Human Resource Officers because, frankly, it's going to pull. We really need to start pulling together the whole HR team around this goal. There's going to be a job for the recruitment folks. There's going to be a real job for the talent management folks, the people who are doing assessment selection. We absolutely know that this is on global leadership development, talent management, to build those experiences, monitor those experiences, and certainly global mobility is key for this. So much development can occur from those opportunities for global development. So from those international assignments, so very important that everybody's working together and sort of seeing this as a valuable goal for the organization. So with that, thank you. I apologize for trying to get through this so quickly, but I will be happy if Sean wants to unmute. I'm happy to answer any questions. We have a little bit of time.
Thank you, Paula. I wanted to go ahead and start with a question that just came in through the chat box. You might see it there yourself, but are there specific activities people should engage in on extended business trips to heighten developmental advantage?
Yes, absolutely. What organizations are doing is they're partnering the business traveler, the person who's going, with a peer. So very critical that it's a peer. And that peer is spending the time sharing information about that host location. It's not so much a sightseeing trip as it is a kind of a heightening one's awareness of the differences and similarities of the subsidiary, of the location. Ideally, it depends on, so for instance, if you're in a consumer products firm, trying to understand the differences with the consumer, the clients, whatever those challenges may be. If you're in a leadership role, maybe understanding the differences of how different practices roll out in the local environment. So the idea is to really let the host national lead in that regard, not make it a sightseeing trip, not make it a dog and pony show, but really heighten the individual's awareness on what could be different. That tends to be a best practice, and people report that it was extremely valuable.
Wonderful. All right, Paula, I want to thank you so much for your time today. This is a really interesting session. I think it's really valuable. And again, I'm going to be distributing a link to view the entire recording of today's session, which will include visual components of the PowerPoint along with the audio. So it'll be a full experience to share with colleagues who were not able to attend today. But again, if you have any feedback for us, please send an email to info@rw-3.com to get in touch with us. And again, thank you, Paula, and thank you for everyone for your time and for joining today.
Thank you, Sean. My pleasure.
Thanks all.
Take care.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.